Before we well and truly kick off, I would like to pay my respects to the peoples of the Kulin Nation, whose land has fed and sheltered me for the last few chapters of my life. I pay respects to their elders past and present, to any mob who may also be joining us in this talk today. Hello? Furthermore, I wish to condemn the atrocities vocally condemn the atrocities that are currently ongoing in Armenia, Uganda, Palestine, and Ukraine. So, without further ado, I'm back! So you may be wondering who the red-headed skeleton up the front is. I don't know who that is. That's clearly false advertising, because that's not who's speaking. The tattoos are a complete coincidence. What I'm not posing is Gideon Nav of the Ninth House. I'm Samara-Jade Sendek. I am a Gunai Kanai and Palawa woman. I am also a writer, narrative designer, and QA wench. I specialize in working with large and established IP. My credits include Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, and Victoria 3. I'm an ex-MMA fighter. I'm learning how to DJ. I also bounce around the indie space. Sometimes I work on G14 classified material as well. So, you may be wondering why a narrative designer is yarning about marketing. Why is this uppity QA wench talking about selling a product? Why is a writer talking about the fine nuances of selling 11 billion copies of a video game? Doesn't she know that she's out of her depth on marketing to the white alpha male gamer? I am, but that's beside the point. My point is, in a shocking twist, I know punk better than most marketing people. If you don't believe me, believe Oscar Wilde. If a work of art is rich and vital and complete, those who have artistic instincts will see its beauty, and those to whom ethics appeal more strongly than aesthetics will see its moral lesson. It will fill the cowardly with terror, and the unclean will see in it their own shame. And when you're wearing a coat like that, how can you disagree? It's a bit mouthier than my usual choice of pithy quote, so clear it up. Aesthetics are ideologies. It's not just a look. You can't have an aesthetic without a logic behind it. And if you do, what you have is a soulless trend, like AI art. You have to make your look, your feel, actions, attitude, and thought processes talk to each other. Otherwise, you've got slop. Got it? Great, I get to rant for another 30 minutes. The Oxford Dictionary defines an aesthetic as a set of principles underlying the work of a particular artist or artistic movement. In short, there are rules for why punk is punk, core is core, K is K, and horror is horror. Resisting an oppressive force, on paper, makes horror and punk one and the same. In practice, not really. Punk is about a no-frills, salt-of-the-earth figure, realistically anyone in this room, seizing control of their cruel circumstances and doing something about it. Horror is about how people act in agonizing fear and growing beyond the monstrous into something powerful. Punk is the hope you will see a better tomorrow. Horror is the medicine that helps you live with your fears. In short, punk is Dead Rising and horror is Resident Evil. But Gideon, we just call those aesthetics a genre and call it a day. But you've fallen for my trap card. I flip deconstructive thinking. This card lets me turn the discussion around by pulling the argument apart. Any good discussion of aesthetics, in my not even remotely humble opinion, begins with deconstruction. So let's pull the thing apart. The thing here being cyberpunk, because I'm sick to death of people doing cyberpunk dirty. What we want is a creamy fondue of anime, grungy, and realistic art styles for the visuals. How that expresses is in an almost manic dream state mingled with cluttering curios and disrepair. The values of what dystopia you're presenting are polished to a mere sheen to contrast the disrepair. In your narrative, pessimism and hopefulness are as much a contrast as anarchism and capitalism. Your hero is liberating themselves and hopefully the people around them, while struggling against the primary key to power, a corporation, a corrupt government, a conspiracy. This is cyberpunk at its core. You are wielding the instruments of your torture to tear down the empire of suffering, right at the cusp of its near victory. Well, actually, I hear some people thinking, aesthetics has a use in games already. We just call it the MDA model. No. The definition in the mechanics dynamics aesthetics framework is a misnomer. It is talking about the means of engagement, not means of identity, and how people interact with a game and not why they identify with it. What I'm about here is drawing people to the vibes, not why they do the thing. And you thought I wasn't a stickler for semantics. Aesthetics should absolutely concern itself with emotional responses, but also figure out traits of being. Hence why I mention a guy as problematic as Jacques Derrida, right next to a gal as problematic as Robin Hunicke. Screening genetic traits and rebuilding it to what it needs to be is our goal. Genre is divorced of emotion. It's about the look and the feel. Sometimes it goes and gets a little flossy and looks at what it does as well. Aesthetics goes the extra mile to figure out the attitude and thought processes as well as the rest of the humble pie. Cool? Cool. Quick photo grab. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 3.5. Nope, we got one more. And more people joining us. Okay, we got it, we're good. So, firstly, what an aesthetic is not is a loose collection of looks. Does anyone see why I targeted cyberpunk now? No? Good. It has a lot of imagery that makes it distinctive, and it has a lot of what actually makes it punk. Self-autonomy, self-empowerment, corruption of power, hopelessness, wealth disparity, but it's often reduced to its look. When it's done to clothes, we call it techwear. When it's done to games, we mistake it for synthwave, vaporwave, cybercore, nanopunk, biopunk, animecore, cyberpop, lunapunk, cyberghetto. The list goes on. People like the flashing lights and the prosthetics. So shiny, so chrome. They also like the underpinning ideals behind it, even if cyberpunk can do without the rampant anti-Asian racism in it. Another talk for another time. But when your punk is reduced to a corporate drone solving a conspiracy rather than a street-level hacker, people tend to notice. So why is MDA also on this list? Because a loose presentation of mechanics is also not an aesthetic. First-person shooter is a useless marketing term. Because Portal is an FPS, Power Wash Simulator is an FPS, Amnesia the Bunker is an FPS, and Unreal Tournament is an FPS. There are underpinning mechanisms and an agreed presentation of them, but is there anyone in the room who's ever heard of someone who just has like a laundry list of FPSs and they compare the mouthfeel of them? Or do they all go for like military shooters? See what I mean? Thank you. Okay, some people may be thinking, this isn't a marketing talk, I'm out. Wait! Yes, this actually has a point. There are serious dangers for not getting this right. So, your social impact is a key one. Solarpunk, as we speak, is being co-opted by far-right elements through greenwashing. Because it's being reduced to good looks, and family's good, farming good, make both great together. So, Nazism, I said the N-word, crept in and it's hijacking it. Because it's basically saying, look at our families, look at how sleek and polished that we can make our living situation is. Except, no, it's not. Commercializing the look without the thinking has opened the door to the very unsavory white alpha male gamers. Solarpunk was intended to challenge commodified, stratified living. Instead, it has become a tool of the enemy. Marketing. In general, the audience has a big WTF moment and gets angry. And that's what happened to Dragon Age 2. They got railed because they were expecting a real-time with pause experience with a rather deep and layered tactical combat system. And what they got was more of an ARPG in a limited city with companions. Inquisition turned it back around, but the audiences were better prepared for a little subversive thinking. And BioWare had actually smarted from that. And Pipeline, you have to make sure everyone is pulling together in the right direction because we almost didn't get Half-Life. No Half-Life means no Valve means no Steam also means no indie boom, and most of us wouldn't be here. Build it and they will come is not a sustainable practice, and it will kill the project. Now to fulfill the contractual obligations, back to the ranting obligations. The look, the feel, the actions, the attitude, and the thoughts behind an aesthetic can be reworded to, who are you, what do you look like, what are you about? When this happens to people, we call it a clique. I'm a goth because I dress the part, listen to the music, attend the nightclubs, and mix in the community. There's also just me there at a LARP. So goth is an aesthetic I fit with. And that applies to metal legend and national treasure Rob Halford. His look, feel, actions, attitude, and thoughts ended up defining metal after the 70s. That's why we have the Leather Daddy look as part of the accepted metal uniform. Do I really need to explain the oxygen thief on the screen, or can you fill that part in yourselves? Yeah, well, cool. It's just an insult. Great. We'll leave it at that. For fiction, genre is much the same thing. Your art style, narrative, mechanics, sound design, and systems, or your look, your feel, actions, attitude, and thought processes are the main points, both at the broad strokes and the moment-to-moment levels. They have to be talking to one another. That should have been up a little earlier. Confused? Now what is the marketing part? Nailing a core aesthetic and having its art, gameplay, and story meld is imperative to marketing. If you get this right, your marketing material is clear, readable, and stands out from the pack. Borderlands and Fallout both have trashy post-apocalyptic vibes with guns galore and intended critique about human nature. Bonus points for a fan-found critique about corporatocracy. Borderlands takes place with an absurdist overtone with the comic look to boot. Without either, it would have just dissolved into the glut of other testosterone-poisoned shooters. And Fallout takes a retro-futuristic approach in that clinging to the past prevents a better future from emerging. Without that framing, it just becomes another depressing nuclear-blasted hellscape. They hit the same talking points. Conflict is inevitable because humans are dumb, panicky, and dangerous animals, but they're both wildly different in their identity. It's next to impossible to confuse one for the other or anything else because the player is clear about who they are, what they look like, and what they're about. And remember, I said ideology before. This goes into fashion, architecture, which banging talk earlier today, by the way, arts movements, social attitudes, and in a word, it's philosophy. It's just not just one thing in particular. You can have a direction that reaches for too far or too nebulous an idea. Darkest of Days, by this logic, was, and still is, oppressively hard to market because there's nothing to tie its disparate parts together other than time-traveling shooter, historically accurate edition. Dead silence. No one's excited for it, I'm not excited for it, and I'm a history nerd. There's no underpinning ideology and no real way to say, this is what we stand for, or this is the lesson we have to impart here. It's just go back in time and shoot Romans with a shotgun. And neither does the look help when the field is inundated with sloppy examples. Pixel art, anime, medieval European cultural soup, Mika, dark and brooding protagonist, rom-com with a toxic love interest. Those are just the standout examples. And I don't know about anyone else, but when someone uses buzzwords like that, I immediately think, fuck me stupid, which one? This is how you get people complaining about generic fantasy or another pixel art RPG. Taste aversion applies to art and mechanics, not just cupcakes. But when you get art, design, sound, and narrative talking to one another, that's when the magic happens. Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy is trash in every single aspect, down to the free use assets, even if it did need a little bit of flipping to make it work. It's still a keen look into how janky creation and play are. It leans into the trash core clutter as a tip to this. The game stands out visually, but it's also a good meditation on perseverance. What is it? What does it look like? What's it about? It's a trash core platformer about trying and failing at something until you get it right. At the other end of the coin, Darkest Dungeon leans into the dungeon crawling experience while also putting stress management and cosmic horror front and center. The game's seeming unfairness not only affects the player's units, but the player's own stresses as well. There are countless videos of people losing their cool playing this game, up to and including many a smashed keyboard. And there are videos of other players completely trivializing bosses. You can lean on its mechanical difficulty, while also setting up moments to humiliate world-ending horrors with a muzzle-loaded pistol. What is it? What does it look like? What it's about? It's a horror strategy dungeon crawler about staring down the abyss and overcoming it. Now, looking the part doesn't necessarily mean fitting the part. Wearing black doesn't make you goth. It can just denote you as a Melburnian. Having robo-prosthetics doesn't make you cyberpunk. Just because it handles like something doesn't mean it's that thing either. Blowing up a bank doesn't make it cyberpunk. It can make you a cowboy, a war criminal, a thief, or a highly destructive goat. You have to make your look, feel, actions, attitude, and thought processes fit. In Cyberpunk's case, you have to be anti-establishment. You have to tell a salt of the earth story. You have to deal with the digital dystopia. I mean, hell, you can take 30 minutes outside and another 30 minutes on your social media platform of choice. Cyberpunk story, right then and there. Ignoring all of that is how you get Deus Ex Human Revolution. You're battling for a corpo, beholden to a CEO, and at the end of the game you can choose between three endings. Corporation 1 gets the power, Corporation 2 gets the power, or ending number 3, the Illuminati gets the power. It's not punk. You've just concentrated power into the bad guy's hands. And even when there's a geopolitical conspiracy, it's like, what are you doing? You're working for the man. And in the sequel, you play a cop. It's not punk. It's a sparkling tech-noir. But if you get all of this right, you've got a narrative hook, art direction, and consumer pitch all in one neat package. There's a reason Lone Agent in a free market hellhole alters their body to take control of their life works. There's a reason Man Too Angry to Die goes on a one-man war against the Christian afterlife. It works. There's a reason people dress as gloomy spectres of the past to celebrate life today. Works. The look, the feel, the actions, the attitude, and the thoughts behind the aesthetic convey something human. We know who the thing is, we know what it looks like, and we know what it's about. Most importantly, we know how it resonates with us. And that is something that everyone knows what they want. Thank you. Another happy landing. There's your additional homework on the far side of the screen. All very good reads. Proof is, I'm also pleased to say, like, this is an entire, these are all trans people in some flavor or another. Also presented by a trans woman, so yay. I'm also back in the market if anyone needs my ranting for good. And only the forces of good. Yeah, I think we can kick it over to questions now.
If anyone's got a question, please raise your hand and I'll bring over the microphone. Thank you.
How do you feel about if you are trying to take from pre-established genres like solar punk and cyberpunk and all those sorts of things. How do you feel about like combining them to make sort of crossover genres? Does that like essentially weaken the pre-existing genre, or can it work?
That's how we got Doom. Is like, so you basically took, so id Software took 70s and 80s thrash metal, the old B-side sci-fi films, B-side grindhouse horror, slapped it together with like some pretty state-of-the-art tech at the time, and like they were already pretty skilled at like at making first-person shooters. Like before id was Apogee, and they made Wolfenstein. So they got very good at first-person violence. So they threw all of that into a blender, and like now, like that's one of our pillars. Like not just in game development, but in like for sci-fi horror. One of the power fantasies that we always fall back to, like man too angry to die goes on a one-man war against the Christian afterlife. Like that's Doom. It's also Space Marine. It's also Bolt Gun. It's also a lot of other games because it works. So you can do the same thing with solar punk and cyberpunk. You kind of just have to know what elements you're taking and how that meshes properly.
Where can we see you at PAX?
Well, we can see it. You can see me at PAX. I'm at. I'll be in the tabletop section all 3 days. I'll be running Thirsty Sword Lesbians. In case that wasn't obvious. I'll also be 8:30, 9:30 on Rick Stem's Games Writing Challenge panel on the Friday evening at the Wombat Theatre. I think I got that right. Yep, no, we got that right. Great. So if you're just starting out to the industry, you're a student, or you just want to expand your chops into writing, myself, a fellow from Grinding Gear, and both Rick and another fellow from Pickpock will be adjudicating the panel.
2 seconds, sorry.
Yep, wait for the microphone, otherwise the camera's not going to like you.
Thank you.
I'll just be extra loud. So clearly you've seen some cyberpunk that's not punk. Do you have any other aesthetics or genres that you see done very poorly all the time?
Okay, well, we're going to go back through this.
Yeah, show us. Yeah, let's go again.
Back. Yeah, who knows what the fantasy game over there is? No. Guess again. No, guess again. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's a I think it's an Urs or very early 10s fantasy game. I think it came out of somewhere in Eastern Europe. It's called Two Worlds. I remember before I reached the age of reason, well before I had any estrogen in my system, went down to the video shop. Who remembers that? Went down to the video shop. I picked out a game to rent for a week. It was called Two Worlds. I put it in the Xbox 360 for all of 30 minutes. The voice acting was terrible. The UX was a nightmare. I immediately gave up because, like, I was just a, like regular Joe white dude who happened to be a knight that needs to go rescue a damsel in distress against the big bad evil guy who, like, just does things for reasons. Immediately returned the game, and I got another copy. Got another game. Yeah, I believe that's when I picked up Gears of War. I had much more fun with that. But that's kind of the problem. Is like even getting your basic genre fiction wrong. Even getting like very basic aesthetics. It's like fantasy tends to be a bit more of a genre than an aesthetic itself, but you're still leaning on other sorts of ideologies. You're still leaning on things like Gothic architecture. You're still things like Gothic architecture, like high Renaissance period, low Renaissance period, I think you can find, I think he's a doctor, Paris Butfield Addison. He's a medieval historian. He'd be able to tell you what's more wrong about, historically accurate medieval European fantasy, if there ever is such a thing. But yeah, it's like even the mainstays, very, very easy to screw up. It's like you need to know who you are, what you're about, and what are your actions saying.
All right, less leading question this time, but great pitch. What's your approach to balancing keeping authentic to the ideology and philosophy, as you've just told us so wonderfully, with allowing the player to express themselves through their gameplay choices and mechanics, which is, of course, the strength of video games?
That's the strength of RPGs. So I find that things like FPSs, racing games, stuff that's like very railroaded and like limited in its freedom. A lot of the time, it's like you'll see the player agency expressed through the tools they use, like basically trying to fit a glove to a hand. So if you're navigating like a genre and you're actually trying to think about bigger ideas like autonomy, how you're doing like distribution of power, or in horror's case, like how are you trying to survive this, like having a more rigid theme, a less rigid theme, I should say, something a bit more flexible, then it's like, okay, that would be a better fit for an RPG. But for something that's a bit more rigid, I really don't like using Soulsborns, but this isn't a design talk, so I can use the Soulsborne. Bloodborne actually has a very rigid theme of maternity and motherhood. And a lot of what the player ends up doing, if they're not actually careful about how they engage with whatever's going on, you end up killing one of the companion characters. I think her name's Ariana, and she has a cosmic child, but that's a repeating motif throughout the game. And it's like you can just choose to kill her and continue that cycle of violence, or you can get the umbilical cords that you need to get the true ending another way. So it's like there are little ways you can do it, but also games does have a strength, but unfortunately it's like if you want that true freeform agency, you need tabletop. Digital games just aren't up to that snuff yet.
So if you can pass the mic down.
Thank you for the talk. I always love something that I know I'm going to walk away thinking about afterwards. Just trying to reconcile aesthetic versus genre. Are we trying to visualize it as more of like a Venn diagram with overlap? Because I don't feel like you can have aesthetic fit in genre or genre fit in aesthetic.
I need to do this in such a way where it's like I'm still in the camera's eye, but I can demonstrate it. So it's like, so basically it's like, think about a bag like this. It's like, this would be aesthetics, and it's like, this would be a genre. So it's like, genre fits into an aesthetic. When you think about horror, you have slasher films on one end, and then you have torture porn on the other side. So think Saw, Hostel. They're conveying two very different things. So while they are both horror genre, the aesthetics are very different. The ideology and the thought processes are very different. Whereas with the slasher villain, it's like it's a different take on the monster of the week. Like you have this very present human force coming after you in a way, and now you have to deal with that. It's like it's a mistrust of your fellow humans. Whereas things like torture porn is looking at it at a very different angle. So you're looking at it in such a way where it's like, here's this terrible situation. What are you going to do to escape it? How can you get out of this trap? As opposed to there's a creature coming towards you. If that makes sense.
Thank you very much.
Cool. I'm just gonna sneak in a quick question of my own. Are there any students with us today? All right, you first hand up. All right, you get the lecture notes. Yay! Good luck on your journey. Any more questions? Oh,
Thank you.
With the high use of punk as a suffix for a lot of genres, such as not solar punk, steampunk, which is obviously a lot older. Is there any of them you think that are just in terms don't actually match or just haven't been used properly from the get-go?
that's actually a pretty good question. Okay, so have I actually thought of popular genres that aren't being used correctly? Is that the essence of nobody's really?
Yeah,
using
well, I want to say popular, but in terms I would say solar punk is preferred as cyberpunk, but solar punk, examples of solar punk I've seen, I've never seen those two match correctly. You see what I mean?
That's because it's okay, so steampunk is a really good one. So the old guard of steampunk was the Regency period of England was 1870 to 1910, so Victorian and Neo-Edwardian. So looking at those aesthetics, it's old steampunk used to be as salt of the earth and very cynical like cyberpunk. Except we now have steampunk 2, or as one of my friends likes to call it, gaslit fantasy. Because it's gaslighting everyone into thinking that they actually it's actually punk when no, it's not. The new guard of steampunk is basically Regency era romance for people who are convinced that they like fantasy more than romance. No, you don't. You just really like Rococo fashion, and you just want to smooch the ladies. That's not punk. That's a fantasy romance. So, in a way, it's still that misappellation. It's still that no, that's not what it is. It's it needs a new name. It needs a new title. It needs it needs a new paradigm. But unfortunately, gaslit fantasy or a gaslamp fantasy or it's not as evocative or punchy as steampunk. It doesn't have the history there.
Or as cybercore is just cyberpunk, it's not.
Yeah.
Doesn't have that history that catches to it.
Cyber scene. It's you're there for the look. You're there to enjoy yourself. You're not there to actually no. You would. If it's cyberpunk, it's no. You are there to you're there to throw down. You're ready to fight. But then you have a look at cyber scene, and it's or even cyber goth. It's there's a lot to do about the look. Not to diss the cyber goths in the goth community. It's there's a whole other tangent about mortality and how we're basically just plugged into screens and machinery all day. And it's that. It's the death that way. So there is a thought process there. Cool.
A bit of a different question. I've heard a lot of people say that Cyberpunk 2077 isn't really cyberpunk. Do you agree with this? And if you do, what would you call it instead? What would you label it instead if it's not actually cyberpunk?
Okay. So this is where it gets a little funky. Is that it does interrogate itself after a while. So cyberpunk at its start. Especially in the opening waves where it's you're taking you can respond to police distress signals, so you're taking down cyber psychos who are as much a victim of the machine as you are. That's where I can easily say it's not punk. You're just an agent of the machine. Having said that, it does sit down and interrogate yourself. It interrogates itself. It asks okay. So what is cyberpunk actually? And that's why I linked it back to the line of you're using the tools of your oppression. You are taking control, you're basically just hacking off bits of your body and using that machinery as a means to fight back. And by the end of the game, like, most of the endings are, in a way, doing that. The one ending, Don't Fear the Reaper, it's like that's where you literally just pick up a pair of machine guns, you storm the building, and you blow the thing to shit. In the there's the Star ending where it's like you rally a community of fellow outsiders, and you storm the gates. Like, yeah, a lot of them end up dying, but it's still that it's also a punk expression of a found family. It's the family you chose, the family that chose you. There's another one where it's like, you're rallying the old guard cyberpunks, and Johnny Silverhand ends up taking over. And through that lens, it's like, the old guard still has fight in them. They're they're the ones that, like, those old ideals are coming to the forefront. And that's the framing there. Now, the two endings that aren't punk, there's the devil ending, where you basically sell your soul to the devil in the hopes that you will preserve yourself, and quelle surprise, they backstab you, because it's Arasaka, they're the bad guys, why would you do that? And then there's the tower ending, which is, the pride before the fall, is that you end up selling yourself off to Militech and the United States government, who do keep their end of the bargain. But the trade-off there is, like, you can never be a frontline combatant again. You are just another a nameless face in the crowd, because you can't interface with your cyberware anymore. So it's like, in a way, yes, cyberpunk is still cyberpunk, but it's doing so in such a way that it's like it's got to toe its line. It's like, because the machine doesn't like resistance, and especially doesn't like vocal resistance. I'm really making the volunteer walk around here. I'm so sorry.
Hello.
Hello.
This may be slightly controversial.
We like controversy.
Do we? I guess I'm wondering if sort of like nitpicking genre like this is, I guess, necessarily helpful for like marketing, like branding something. So like, say, putting something under like hashtag cyberpunk is probably going to get more clicks than like picking a more niche sort of like cyber something thing. You know what I mean? Like do you think it's sort of worthwhile in terms of actually trying to sell your game, of being like, it's this vibe, so like I'm just going to throw it under this umbrella because, country is country, even if it's like techno country,
So were you present for, I forget the speaker's name, it was about storytelling through architecture. Yeah, well, there was a fantastic point there I'm going to reiterate now. Humans are information misers. It's like, even though it's like, you can see like something that's, something that might clunk within an aesthetic, within a genre, within like any kind of marketing. It's like, we can always tell, right? Even though you can't quite articulate the words, you can usually tell something's clunking. And that's old mate over there who was asking last question before. Like, people are saying Cyberpunk 2077 wasn't Cyberpunk. It's like, it has to toe a line, but it still comes to the best endings are punk, right? It's the same thing. It's like people they will notice that something it's not right, even if they can't really say it, or if they do say it, it's going to come off as a negative Steam review and says like, "This is shit. Don't buy it." That's like, so there is a so yeah, on a small scale, yes, it isn't. So yes, on a small scale, at this level, yeah. At a big scale, Stormgate. All the trailers seem to point towards a sci-fi hero FPS, or a hero shooter. Turns out it was an RTS. They fucked up, because the genre, what they were advertising wasn't the thing they were actually trying to sell, which is it's marketing 101.
Thank you.
Of course.
Actually, on the topic of Stormgate, I feel like that failure was like a lot more of just because most of its audience is just coming from StarCraft.
Yeah, this is where it's like, if people were asking my personal opinion, I think Blizzard was the worst thing that ever happened to the RTS genre. Because Blizzard, like, even though it's like a Warcraft is a big cultural touchstone, it also kicked off like a massive arms race between Westwood, who had done Dune 2 and Command and Conquer, and Blizzard itself, who basically like just ripped Warcraft out of like Warhammer Fantasy assets, and then did the same thing again with Warhammer 40k and StarCraft. So yeah, that has actually become an indelible part of that. So Stormgate also has a lot of other issues in that it was just, besides the genre not really being explored properly, it was also just like, it was poorly marketed to begin with. It also, from memory, it was just going up against like so many heavy hitters that, what was the point? It's like, it was just getting drowned, really.
I think that's somewhat true, but also the fact that Stormgate kind of targeted a StarCraft audience and almost completely took away what made StarCraft 2 specifically so beautiful in terms of like the unit design and the time to kill and such. So I mean, this is a bit off topic. So
yeah. I think we'll close out because I did see one other hand in the air, and I want to get back to them. But yeah, it's like you're also kind of just forgetting that like Battleborn did that with Overwatch, and even though they were two completely different games, people just like, Gearbox fought a ground war against Blizzard and lost, and Stormgate kind of did the same thing. So it's like, you know, whoever's got the better marketing wins there.
Cool. I just wanted to kind of check with you that my takeaway has been what you intended the takeaway to be.
Yep.
I kind of feel like it's a little twofold when it comes to talking about aesthetic and marketing and the relationship there. The first is having a better understanding of aesthetic as developers, as almost like an early intervention. So you need to be thinking about aesthetic and creating for aesthetic when you're still conceptualizing your mechanics, your art direction, and everything there, like you said earlier. So that when you say, my game is cyberpunk, it really is cyberpunk.
Well, that's 1 out of 2 big green ticks. What's the second one?
The second one is, once you've got a game, choosing the right aesthetic to hashtag it under and market it with.
Yep.
Am I 2 for 2, or is there
Two for
another
two.
one that I'm... Okay, fantastic.
2 for 2, you get a cookie.
Woo!
Round of applause. All right. Yeah, I think we're about time there.
Oh, we've got 7 more minutes if anyone does.
7 minutes?
Yeah.
Wow, I need to have a longer talk in future.
You're all good. You took about 20 minutes to talk?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question, if you don't mind, actually.
Don't mind at all.
From a fellow audio nerd, how do you think music can influence aesthetic, and what kind of things that you do point composers or audio people or game devs working with composers to think about when they're thinking about audio in their game?
So instead of like what do you look like, it's what do you sound like. But it still has that core conceit of who are you, what are you about? Which is why we're now starting to see Argent Metal become a thing, like in the 8 years since Doom 2016. Is that, like, yeah, it has elements of gent, electronics, EBM, and just some absolutely insane guitar work. But we're now starting to see, like, there are a lot of covers. We're actually seeing some original songs. There's one guy who's done an Argent Metal cover of Duel of the Fates called Doom of the Fates. Even on YouTube, there are covers of other game songs in the style of Doom or in the style of Argent Metal. I think one guy, Jeff plays guitar, made his name in incorporating. I discovered him through a Bloodborne soundtrack, Ludwig the Holy Blade, which is a waltz, but it was turned into an Argent Metal soundtrack, and it slaps. Because, like, you have that, like, ethereal boss fight. You have that, like, almost ethereal, like, dance-like boss. But now with the Argent Metal cover, like, there's a lot more anger and rage and aggression coming through, and it's more about the fight rather than, in Bloodborne, about the tragedy. So, even I'll have to find where's the slide? Okay, back. Here we go. Rob Halford. Again, it's like Judas Priest, very influential in metal. Like, hands up if you haven't heard Breaking the Law. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's more people than I expected. Like, wow. Anyway, still, it's like Rob Halford is largely responsible for introducing leather daddy fashion to metal. So it's not just the look, but the sound as well. It's like very influential to thrash metal. Like you can't really look at a lot of British metal nowadays without running into Ozzy Osbourne or Robbie Halford.
So you're tying in aesthetics to culture and people.
Yeah, like I said, it's a philosophy.
Yeah.
It's an outlook on life.
Thank you.
It's like we even in the audience, like there are about 3 people I could pick out as a punk, another 2 I could pick out as a goth, and then everyone else is in the loosely defined normcore nerd. It's like there's nothing wrong with that. It's like there's nothing wrong with just being that. And it's like what, power to you. I can't do it. But also, it's like there's very few people that will match my expression of goth. There's very few people that will match, audience member Phoebe from Gark. There are very few people that will match her expression of goth. Junebug from S-Bug, there's very few people that will match their expression of punk. It's just, there's a layer of individuality to it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Hello, that was great. Thank you. Appreciate it. My question was to do with you talking about when the aesthetic stops matching with the underlying ideals and all that, then it begins to clunk.
Yeah.
But what happens when the clunking is so consistently happening that becomes the new meaning? Like the person who introduced, say, I might have missed that bit, but the leather to the grouping or whatever, then that becomes actually pretty closely tied and that aesthetic is brought in. How's the space for those first people? Like, without shutting them down, saying, no, your aesthetic is not matching this.
Like, it's actually a really good point because that's like, there are, like, it still ties in with the idea of the look, the attitude, the thought processes, the ideology behind it, as well as like the presentation. Like Lolita fashion. So in Japan, that is actually a punk movement, because like that was more a matter of like there were adult women who they didn't want to get married, they didn't want to have kids, they didn't want to be the very demure, very mindful housewife. They wanted to they were living their life. And like one of the frequent criticisms, like in that intermingling of Rococo fashion with punk ideals and recapturing that lost childhood, chucked into a blender, one of the common catcalls against them were like you look like children, grow up, and their response back was like, we don't want to. Like, why do we want to do that? Like they're trying to preserve themselves.
Yeah.
So it's like there's still that that ideology that sprung forth from self-preservation, and that's just how it presented.
Of course, yeah. I guess it's just that when there's a group happening at the same time, that's easy to see. But perhaps when one person is trying to start this thing by themselves, there's a worry that they might get gate-kept, saying, actually, you can't associate that with that, before it gives it a chance to become a movement.
So that's kind of where it goes back into the philosophy and outlook. So there are people that would try to have a look at me and say, oh, that's a goth, that's cool, I want that look. And then immediately turn around and say, yeah, we're actually pro-life. It's like, that's where it's like, I would say, hold the fuck up, I'm about to gatekeep here. Because it's like, it's not punk. It's not punk, you are denying someone else the right to live. You are stealing someone else's autonomy. That's not in any way, shape, or form the ideal. Like I said before, goth is about dressing as a specter of the past. It's about being this memento mori, remember death. that's part of the subculture as a means to celebrate and remember life. Like, there are a lot of goths who have gone through suicidal depression. There are a lot of goths who have experienced death early. And it's very near and dear to the headspace and the heart space. So when you hear someone like saying, you know, hey, I'm actually pro-life, or hey, I'm a Trumpist, or hey, like a lot of like really conservative ick. That's okay, we'll cut that out in post. When you hear like something like that, that's where it's like you turn around and go like, oh, well, now I need to gatekeep, because it's like that's not what we're about. That's not what, like, that's a very damaging influence. And Nazis have been trying to infiltrate punk, goth, like all the other like very, like what we would nowadays call the far left movements for a long, long time, because they're always trying to get up the fucking ladder. Bloody cancer cells. So yeah, it's like when you're having thoughts that ultimately conflict with what the thing is about, that's when it's like you will experience a lot of gatekeeping. I think another prominent example, also featuring our favorite FPS targets, the furry fandom. Literally, like, we're dealing with Nazis, and mass ejected them. Like, they had successfully like just thrown them out, because like furries are ultimately about freedom of sexuality, freedom of expression, freedom of self. It's a modern totemic tradition as well.
Cool. Thank you.
It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but it's like it actually is a very good question.
I'm so sorry, we have to wrap up now. There'll be a keynote just in Zoom 109 in the morning, starting at 4 o'clock. Yes, 4 o'clock. So we've got about 9 minutes to head there. Any questions? If you'd like to talk to the speaker, please take your conversations outside. Thank you.
Quickly, you might want to grab my contact details. I only have so many business cards.